Episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Firstly, an apology for there being radio silence for the last couple of weeks, but unfortunately, sort of family stuff took precedent to whiskey tasting, unfortunately. But family stuff has been dealt with now, so back to whiskey tasting, which I've missed. I missed doing these episodes of the show for you guys. So big thank you to everybody that watched the last episode of the show. That's really, really good of you. Lots of nice comments. I think I haven't caught up with some of them, to be honest with you, but I obviously will do. So this week I thought I would do an overdue episode of the show. In fact, this is so overdue. Well, I should have. Julian the rep for Tortuga Brands, kindly dropped in 2024 with some samples of this Irish brand called Kinahan's, and I tasted them. I thought, yeah, okay, yeah. Parked them, was going to do something with them, but just never did. I mean, you know, and this is no disrespect to people like Julian and the reps and things like that. Just sometimes, I either forget. I get so many samples kind of sent in, and I'm kind of thinking, yeah, okay, I'll do something with that, and sometimes it just never happens, you know, and you kind of have to sort of sometimes hassle me a little bit, I guess, and say, look, you know, you're going to do something, and unfortunately Julian didn't. Well, not until a couple of years later, when he dropped in again and said, I've got some samples you might be interested in. I don't know whether he'd forgotten that he'd dropped in 2 years previous, or whether it was kind of like, you know, a sort of a subtle sort of poking the butt, shall we say. But anyway, so he kindly dropped me in these samples again, and I thought, I really need to do an episode of the show on this. Is really intriguing stuff. So if I can find the notes, so this is, like I said, the brand is called Kinahan's, and it's an Irish whiskey brand, quite a historic brand in actual fact, originally founded in Dublin in 1779, and according to Kinahan's website, was known as the pioneer of Irish whiskey. And well, aren't they all? Has to be said, all these historic brands and what have you, whether they're English, Scottish, Irish, whatever, they all claim to be pioneers of their trade. No disrespect, but it does seem to be used kind of an awful lot. Anyway, so Kinahan's were a bottling company, an independent bottling company, a blender, and apparently were very, very successful. Don't know what the names of their bottlings, I don't have a huge amount of information, but apparently the brand lived on for a number of years and succumbed primarily after or during American Prohibition, like an awful lot of distilleries and brands and things like that suffered due to their biggest export market suddenly being closed. Anyway, so the brand kind of like lay dormant for a number of years until 2014, when it was purchased, and basically the new owners decided to go back to what Kinahan's was all about in their blending, but also an interesting innovation. Now, as we well know, the word innovation, certainly in whisky, and certainly according to the Scottish Whisky Association, is a dirty word. They don't like innovation, they like historic. And of course, we're not going to get involved in all of that, but so what Kinahan's have interestingly done, they've got two collections. Oh, incidentally, one of their claims to fame was apparently in 1807. The Lord Lieutenant of Ireland was incredibly impressed by one of their blends and decided that he was going to have some casks. Whether he paid for them or not, I have absolutely no idea, but all the casks that were basically set aside for the Lord Lieutenant had chalked on LL, and this little moniker has kind of remained on the logo of Kinahan's. But anyway, so Kinahan's have two ranges essentially. They have what they call their core range, which consists of a small batch blend, which is comprised of about 20 casks per batch. It is roughly 37.5% grain aged in first fill bourbon, the same amount of grain aged in second fill bourbon, and 25% malt aged in first and second fill bourbon. Spirit is matured for minimum of 6 years, so sounds quite interesting. They also do what's called a heritage single malt. It's non-chill filtered, American oak aged, and each batch consists of about 20 to 30 casks. Don't know where the single malt comes from. Could be from Cooley, could be from Middleton, who knows. But well, it probably won't come from Middleton, as they don't do single malt in Middleton, do they? They just do pot still. So probably Cooley. But anyway, that's by the by. You know what Irish whiskey brands are like. Anyway, the really intriguing part of Kinahan's is what they've called their Cask project series, and they're spelt Cask, K-A-S-C, because they're hoopy and they're dudes, as they say. No. Anyway, so they have trademarked this name called Hybrid Cask. Now, it's really interesting. Each cask is made up of 5 distinct wood staves. So they use American oak, French oak, virgin black Portuguese oak, Hungarian oak, and this is where the sort of you couldn't do this in Scotland bit comes, chestnut. Now, I did ask whether the ratio of these woods was kept together, but apparently not. These are kind of like almost kind of randomly put together. I've got a picture of the cask coming up shortly. Well, actually, I'll put the picture up now. So a little bit of music while you look at the pretty picture. Anyway, now looking at that picture, my first instinct wasn't the hybrid cask; it was bloody Frankenstein cask. Now, you look at that, and that's obviously the outer staves, and it looks like they've been glued together from various bits of wood the Portuguese cooperage has just had lying around. But I have been informed that the inner staves are all single staves from these 5 distinct pieces, types of wood. Now you can see, obviously, again from the title page, I've only got pictures of there's only the 4 whiskies. But there's 6 here in front of me, and this is what I thought was going to be the really interesting thing about this particular episode of the show, is I have 2 samples of each of the, oh well, I haven't told you that bit, have I? The blend and the malt. Okay, so they basically put a blend together. They have their single malt, and they're aged in these hybrid casks. Now, what I've got is I've got the sample from 2024 and the sample from just a couple of months ago. Now, the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to see whether there's a batch variation. I mean, obviously these casks are put together differently. And then you think, well, maybe they're a batch of about 20 odd casks, maybe. Will that homogenise out, or will there be a difference between 2 years ago and now? So this is what I'm going to be looking at, and I'm really intrigued to do this because I haven't done this yet. I mean, I've obviously tasted them at the time, but I haven't tasted them against each other. Now, one of the interesting things that Julian said to me was that this Portuguese black oak is pretty porous, and as you can see, really gives the whiskey quite a lot of colour. Now, there is quite a colour difference between these 2 batches of the malt, and so I'm going to do obviously the 2024, and then I'm going to do the 2026. So in a sort of unscientific kind of way, we will see whether there is such thing as there is the batch variation, or whether it all comes out exactly the same at the end of the day, because I'm kind of quite intrigued to find this out. So anyway, I'm not going to carry on waffling anymore, well, apart from introduce the lineup, which I'm going to do right now. Okay, I'm going to introduce the lineup, but it's pretty much obvious how I'm doing this. So we're going to kick off with the small batch blend. So like I said, grain and whiskey aged in a combination of first and second fill bourbon. We're then going to move on to the heritage single malt, which like I said, again aged in first fill bourbon. Then we're going to move on to April's 2024's bottling of the blend, the Frankenstein blend. Then we're going to taste obviously the blend from 2026 and see if that again there's a definite colour difference between the two. So it obviously shows that there's some possibly more of the Portuguese oak in this particular bottling, likewise with the malt. So obviously again I have the two malt samples. Incidentally, the blend, blended whiskey is bottled at 46%, as is the heritage single malt. Unfortunately, now when we get to the cask, I don't know why they've done this, but the blend is bottled at 43. I have no idea. It's a little bit of a shame, it has to be said. And the malt is bottled at 45. Now, obviously, I'm guessing non-chill filtration for each. I know that I was always under the impression that 46% was the lowest you could go with regards to that, but I have been told subsequently that you can bottle at a lower ABV and get away without the filtration, but I didn't think you could get away with it at 43%. But anyway, so obviously there's no caramel in these, which is cool. Otherwise they'd have all looked at pretty much bloody identical, but obviously as they don't, we can safely say that there is no colouring here whatsoever and it's all natural. So anyway, really looking forward to this tasting. I think this is going to be really intriguing, so I'm going to kick off with the small batch blend. Right, okay, so let's kick off with the Kinahan's blend. Let's see what the nose gives us on this one, shall we? Fresh, cereally, so I'm getting quite a bit of grain notes up first. There's some quite robust toffeed oak, vanilla cream, a little bit of barley, some apricot, slight nuttiness, bit of fleshy fruit coming through. Yeah, that's a nice nose. It's, yeah, I mean, for a blend that is quite relatively speaking a large amount of malt going in. I mean, some blends, you know, smidgen of malt maybe, so 25% is not too bad. Yeah, and it's got a typical Irishy kind of character to it. It's got a lovely fleshiness, cerealiness. Yeah, I like it. I think that's quite a pleasant nose. Let's see what the palate's like. Bit more weight on the palate, bit more chunkiness, fleshier. Malt is certainly punching above its percentage. Again, quite oaky, quite vanillid, but I don't think the balance is unduly affected. I mean, the first fill oak is obviously quite noticeable. Gives the mouthfeel a lovely creaminess. Sort of the grain kind of comes through on the finish. It's got that crispness, that cereal note. But the oak kind of continues, and I think this is where we're going to see, this is going to be the overriding theme, obviously. I mean, considering the amount of different oak types they're playing around with in the Cask project, we're in that kind of, you know, oak character. You know, if you don't like oak, if you're not a sort of, you know, you're probably going to steer clear of these. But to give it its due, start off with, I think this is a pleasant blend. It's nicely balanced, it's not too oaky, there's enough oak there, it's got a nice mouthfeel. So yeah, I think that's a good starter. Okay, so let's move on to the heritage single malt. Let's see what the nose gives us from this one, shall we? Slightly floral. it's got that sort of pollen heavy kind of flowery character. Apricot, malt, citrus, barley, banana, oily marzipan. Again, oak is certainly up front and centre, but not overwhelming the nose. A little bit of marmalade, possibly, some acacia. Yeah, that's quite pleasant. It certainly puts me in mind of some coolies that I've had over the years. Pleasantly aromatic. I mean, that's again a nice nose. Not sure what it retails for, but yeah, can't argue with that. Pleasant. Let's see what it passes like. There's a lot of oak on the palate, and it bitters quite hard on the finish. A lot of vanilla, a lot of toffee, that kind of character. Again, nice weight and fleshiness, but it's a bit simple. Bit of barley. I mean, I don't mind the bittering of the oak, but it's just a little too oaky for my liking. Again, the quality is pretty good. For me, I would have dialed back a little bit on some of the first fill American oak, because it has just become a little bit too intensive, too intrusive, and it's not really. I mean, the nose was lovely. The nose was really, really good, like that. And if the palate had kind of continued in that kind of fashion, rather than the sort of like the more oak led kind of fashion, I would have really rated that. But as it is, it's just a little bit too oaky for me. Okay, so here comes the interesting bit. So let's kick off with the Cask Project blend. This is the sample that came my way in 2024. Oaky, obviously, not too oaky. I'm getting grippy French oak up first. That sort of tight, tannic French spices, a little bit of apricot, baked fruit, sort of slight bourbon-y kind of note underneath, vanilla, wood spice. There's not a huge amount of grain character or spirit character, has to be said, and we are in that kind of, I guess, Cavalan-y sort of style. I think, if, like I said, if you're going to sort of, if you like that sort of heavy oak character, or you kind of subscribe to the flavour profile kind of thing as opposed to the more purist kind of angle, you're going to really like this. It's got some, I get a little bit of the Hungarian darker oak. I mean, I can pick that out now quite noticeably because of tasting the Rase Hungarian oak, and it had that real darkness of character. There's a little bit of maltiness, there's a little bit of salinity, there's a little bit of graininess coming through. Give it, as long as you leave it to sit. It's when you aerate the whiskey that really agitates the oak, and certainly that becomes kind of quite the focal point. So leaving it to sort of sit in the glass does allow some of the character of the blend to come through. Let's sort of pass on. Like the nose, kicks off with that tight, grippy, spicy French oak. I've got a little bit of American oak happening, a little bit of that sort of softer vanilla, sort of almost kind of ice creamy kind of note. There's a bourbon-y sort of note, certainly on the aftertaste. The Hungarian oak is quite subtle but noticeable, only because I know it's what I'm looking for to a certain extent, with that slightly darker oak kind of character. It's got that sort of quite nice vanilla note, which again, I'm guessing, I'm not sort of too well versed with Portuguese black oak, but if that's again what's adding to that sort of slightly more kind of vanilla pod character, as opposed to the sort of bourbon that I'm getting from the American oak. Got a nice nip to the end. The grain kind of comes through on the end and freshens things up. I mean, I think that's quite pleasantly balanced. Like I said, it was always ever going to be sort of oak led and sort of all about the sort of, you know, the palate in you know, not in palate as in palate in your mouth, but palate as in the sort of like the colour wheel, if you like. So this is where it's going to be drawing a lot of its characteristics from the oak, unashamedly, a bit like I said, like Kavalan has a tendency to do. So I can get it. I understand it. I mean, I am a purist at heart, as you know, but I can appreciate something slightly different. And there's enough spirit character there just to kind of keep it interesting, I think. Okay, so let's move on to the 2026 sample of the Cask Project blend. Let's see what the nose goes on this. Right, straight off the bat, I'm getting a huge amount more of the Hungarian oak. It's got that darkness, that dark toffee and dark honey and dustiness, a lot of tannin. I'm getting less French oak. I'm not getting so much of that tight spiciness. I'm getting more wheatiness. I'm getting more kind of grain character. There's a little bit of grippy tannins there, so the French oak is definitely kind of coming through, and there's a little bit of American oak coming through as well, with that soft vanilla, and obviously the Portuguese oak adding a little bit more of that sort of creme brulee sort of character. But the Hungarian oak is definitely dominating the nose on this, so it definitely goes to show that there is a big difference in batches, and I love that, you know. I mean, who wants the same thing over and over again? I know that there are customers and consumers that want continuity. They want the same. They want to taste the whiskey and they go, I love that, and then, you know, they taste it sort of like a couple of years down the line and it's, you know, quite different, and they go, oh, I'm not quite so keen on that anymore. This is, you know, why you have bloody Diageo chucking vast amounts of caramel at their whiskey, because they want it all to be exactly the same. But anyway, revel in batch variation, you know, the fact that you might not know exactly what you're going to get the second time around, and well, yeah, that's fun. Anyway, let's sort of pass that. Again, the Hungarian oak is kind of the focal point, that dark oak character. A little bit of red fruit, some apricot, ginger. The French oak is coming through right on the finish with that sort of tightness and that spiciness of tannin. Really quite grippy. Again, a subtle wheatiness, it has to be said, kind of coming through. Just to sort of say, well, you know, there is some spirit kind of going on here. It's not all just about the oak, but it is predominantly about the oak. I love the darkness of it. There's enough spirit character to sort of like, you know, keep the purist happy, but like I said, you know, this is, you have to like the sort of like the Kavalan style of whiskey, lakes if you like, to you know, appreciate what they're trying to do. And it's different, it is different, although, you know, it is very similar to, well, it is similar to Kavalan, but it's not in the put together in the same way. I mean, this is kind of like, you know, none of this mucking about with individual casks and blending it all together. Let's just make a cask out of all the bits. I mean, well, you know, genius really, I think, at the end of the day. Okay, so let's move on to the sample of the Cask Project M. This is the sample that came my way in 2024. Let's see what the nose is on this then. Aromatic beeswax, grippy French oak, a lot of French oak. This is kind of like the theme of the first two samples from 2024, that the French oak was the most noticeable. That spicy, dry tannins. There's a little oily marzipan, some tropical apricot, melon. subtle, very subtle sort of Hungarian dark oak note, and a little bit of American oak, a sort of touch of vanilla. So it certainly seems to me that maybe these earlier casks, from which this sample came from, was slightly more French oak than anything else. Certainly a lot less of the Hungarian oak kind of character. But yeah, it's nice, it's pleasant. Again, it's very much like the blend, it's very oak centric, obviously. Anyway, let's sort of pass on. Dense, malty. Again, French oak, noticeable, tight, spicy, tannic, little fleshy fruits and banana, vanilla. There's a little bit more spirit intensity, obviously 45%. I mean, 43 for the blend was okay. I mean, you know, and I can see why they've kept the ABV low, because they wanted to sort of emphasise the oak sweetness and the oak character. I think extra ABV would have probably forced up the spirit character a little bit more. Certainly you would have got the intensity of the alcohol, which would have sort of given it that crisper feeling, and often, you know, when you sort of like have a cask strength whiskey, you put a little drop of water, it will emphasise the oak. And certainly I can see that this is probably why they haven't bottled it at 46%, to sort of keep that sort of a little bit more oak kind of character. It's nice and juicy. Yeah, I mean, I think I slightly prefer the blend to this. I mean, it wasn't overly as oaked as I was expecting, but certainly it was more emphasis on the French and American oak as opposed to the Hungarian. But yeah, I kind of quite like that. Okay, so on to the Cask Project M sample from 2026. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Like the blend, I'm getting a lot more the Hungarian oak. It's got that darkness of character. The French oak and the American oak is a lot more subtle. There's a chunky, vanilla-y kind of character, which I'm guessing is probably the Portuguese oak. The one thing I will say is it kind of slightly lacks the grain note to just cut through the oak. The malt is kind of quite subservient, whereas at least in the blend you get the cereal note of the grain kind of coming through the oak. So for me, I'm kind of more enjoying the blend than I am the single malt in regards to just the balance, of overall balance. But again, like I said, more darkness, more Hungarian oak. Really intriguing. Let's see what the pal's like. A little bit more American oak, a little bit more vanilla, softer vanilla, I'm guessing a little bit more Portuguese oak up front. Still quite dark. I mean, there's still more noticeable Hungarian oak than there was on the previous bottling. Nice spiciness. Again, it just lacks that sort of intensity. It lacks the sort of the grain note to cut through all of that oak character. I mean, yes, it's pleasant. It's a lovely mouthfeel. It tastes nice, I will give you that. And so if you're looking at it, like I said, from a palate kind of point of view, it has a lot of complexity, but the complexity is housed within, obviously, the use of all these different oak staves. So from a kind of a purist angle, I would like a little bit more kind of spirit character, but I can see the attraction of this. And like I said, I think you just get a little bit more of that with the grain, so or the blend, shall we say. Right, okay, Okay, so to sum today's episode of the show, firstly, a big apology to Julian that it's taken 2 years to actually do this episode of the show and actually sort of think about, stocking these particular whiskies. Obviously, as you well know, the show is completely separate to the company that employs me, but there is obviously, I'm the link, as they say, the missing link, possibly. So yeah, big thank you to Julian for sort of like, kicking my butt with regards to sort of looking into Kinahan's and sort of actually doing it. But if I had have done it in 2024, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to sort of see where the batch variation was, or if there was any, which there obviously was. So that's kind of quite cool. Anyway, I liked the blend. I thought the blend was really nice. I mean, they're kind of, trying to, I believe, kind of position it in a kind of like a black bush kind of level. I don't know if it's that kind of inexpensive, to be honest with you, but they're kind of aiming at that kind of market. And yeah, I liked it. I thought it was definitely Irish. It had lots of character, and yeah, I was quite happy with that. The single malt I was less kind of enamoured with, it has to be said. Thought the nose was really nice sort of complexity. Palate, the oak, the first fill American oak had just crept in a little bit too far, and I know you're probably thinking, oh my god, he's saying there's too much American oak, and that's it, oak is oak. I don't care whether it's American oak, French, sherry, you name it, don't care. If there's too much oak and it unbalances the whiskey, which I feel in this instance it has done, it's not really going to sort of like appeal to me. The blend, the cask blend, I thought the first bottling was kind of nice, and it seemed to be that the blend and the malt seemed to have the emphasis more on the French and the American oak, with the Hungarian oak playing sort of second fiddle, whereas the other two bottlings had more noticeable Hungarian oak character. They were darker, so obviously that's the batch you're probably going to buy these days. And like I said, I mean, I liked it. Like I said, you had to kind of look at it in the sort of the Cavalan kind of style. The fact that yes, there's going to be a lot of oak characters. That's what they're aiming for. And like I said, they should have called it Frankenstein cask, because I mean, going back to the picture, I mean, it just kind of. I mean, I know it's the outer staves, but the outer staves look, they've been glued together from all manner of bloody bits. I mean, there's I don't know whether the Coopers kind of like do that and go sort of slap a bit of wine on the outside, make them look kind of like they're kind of, weird and wonderful. And I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Nobody actually looks at these casks. They just kind of do a job at the end of the day, and it's the inner staves are really the things that are actually doing the job. Incidentally, I don't actually quite know what the end pieces are, whether they are indeed made up of all these different staves. I doubt it. I could be wrong. Maybe they are. I didn't ask the question. But anyway, unique, different, and I kind of, to a certain extent, been looking for sort of like, to sort of expand the Irish sort of selection. It's kind of meandered, I guess. It's kind of been the same for sort of like, a year and a day, as they say. And Kinahan's, I mean, whether you like it or not, and some people will love it and some people won't, they're doing something different, something unique. I mean, they've trademarked the hybrid cask, but like I said, they should have called it bloody Frankenstein cask, because that's what it is. It lives. Yeah, check them out if they're available in your market. Like I said, probably go with the blend, the cask blend. I think that's probably the slightly more intriguing. And like I said, you've got the grain component, which kind of like sort of cuts through some of that sort of overt oakiness. So yeah, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's good to be back, as they say. Oh no, I can't say that because he's a bloody old pedo, isn't he? No. Anyway. Yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. All I have to say is good afternoon and good ramming.